Senior Tactical Officer Rilexon stared at the anomaly on his monitor, mandibles clicking nervously as he triple-checked the readings. The energy signature defied Coalition classification protocols, and the object's velocity exceeded anything their systems were calibrated to track. He hesitated only briefly before pressing the alert panel. "Commander Vex Lauren to command deck immediately," the station AI announced, its melodic multitonal voice contrasting with the sudden tension filling Proxima Station's nerve center. Vex Lauren arrived within moments, his scaled crest fully extended, a sign of alertness rarely seen outside combat situations. "Report," he demanded, 8 eyes blinking in sequence as they focused on the main display. "Unknown vessel approaching from Sector 17, sir," Rilexon responded, "moving at approximately 312 times our fastest recorded ship. Energy signatures are, well, they're unlike anything in our database." The commander's outer membranes pulsed a deep crimson. Magnification. The central view screen shifted, focusing on a distant point of light that rapidly grew larger. Silence fell across the command deck as the object's silhouette became clear. There was no mistaking its purpose. The vessel's sleek, angular profile bore the unmistakable hallmarks of a warship, though its design followed no known Coalition aesthetic. "Defensive protocols. Alert the Council," Vex Lauren ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline equivalent flooding his system. "And open all communication frequencies." Activity erupted across the station as shield generators hummed to life and weapon systems emerged from their concealed housings. The 17-species Confederacy had maintained peace for generations, but they had never forgotten how to prepare for war. "Sir," the communications officer called out, her voice wavering slightly, "the vessel has dropped out of FTL directly within our security perimeter. It's massive." The view screen confirmed her assessment as the warship came to a complete stop merely 20,000 kilometers from Proxima Station, close enough to be considered an aggressive posture by Coalition standards. Its hull gleamed with an almost liquid darkness that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the light of the system's sun. Weapon ports lined its surface, yet remained closed in what could either be restraint or supreme confidence. "Ambassador Trelvosh has arrived with the Emergency Council delegation," announced a junior officer as the station's diplomatic contingent filed onto the command deck, their formal attire suggesting they had been in session when the alert sounded. Trelvosh, the willowy representative of the Aetheri consensus, moved to Vex Lauren's side. "Have they made any aggressive moves?" he asked, 12-fingered hands clasped tightly before him. "None, Ambassador. They're just waiting." "Initiate contact," Trelvosh ordered. Standard diplomatic protocols. The communications array sent the carefully crafted first contact message, a mathematical sequence followed by simple greeting algorithms developed over centuries of Coalition expansion. Seconds stretched into uncomfortable minutes with no response. "Perhaps they don't understand our communication methods," suggested Council scientist Medzik. "Their technology appears significantly different from—" "Warning shot," interrupted Security Minister Krevnar, his metallic exoskeleton clicking as he stepped forward. "Across their bow. Minimal yield." Vex Lauren hesitated, eyes meeting Trelvosh's. The ambassador gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "Single pulse, lowest setting," the commander confirmed. A lance of energy discharged from the station's forward array, precisely calculated to pass 5 kilometers from the unknown vessel's hull, the universal signal of caution rather than hostility. The beam never reached its intended trajectory. Instead, it dissipated harmlessly against an invisible barrier surrounding the warship. "Their shields absorbed it completely," Medzik whispered, eyes wide with scientific fascination overriding her fear. "The energy didn't even register on their defensive systems." Without warning, every communication screen on the command deck activated simultaneously, displaying a crystal-clear image that caused several officers to step back in shock. The figure appeared similar to several Coalition species, yet distinctly different. Bipedal, with a soft exterior and peculiar coloration. It wore what appeared to be a formal uniform of deep blue with silver accents. "This is Captain Helena Reyes of the UES Thunderchild," the being stated in perfect galactic standard, its voice suggesting a complexity of vocal cords that few species possessed. "We represent humanity. We've been watching your stars for centuries. Now we need to talk." The docking bay of Proxima Station fell silent as the airlock cycled open. Security drones hovered at attention, while representatives from each coalition species stood in rigid formation, some out of diplomatic protocol, others from thinly veiled fear. Captain Helena Reyes stepped through first, flanked by 4 officers in matching dark blue uniforms. The humans moved with an easy confidence that seemed at odds with their status as visitors in alien territory. Ambassador Trelvauge noticed immediately how the humans carried themselves. Back straight, eyes forward, scanning their surroundings with quick, efficient movements that suggested military training far beyond ceremonial posturing. "Welcome to Proxima Station," Trelvauge said, performing the traditional greeting gesture of open palms and lowered head. "I am Ambassador Trelvauge of the Etheri Consensus, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Coalition Council." Captain Reyes nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the ambient light. "Thank you for receiving us, Ambassador. I apologize for our abrupt arrival, but circumstances left us little choice." Security Minister Krevnar stepped forward, his metallic exoskeleton gleaming under the docking bay lights. "Your vessel is heavily armed and entered restricted space without authorization. Explain yourselves before we consider this an act of aggression." One of Reyes' officers, a tall man with skin significantly darker than the captain's, tensed visibly, but Reyes herself merely smiled. "Minister, if we meant you harm, we wouldn't have announced ourselves. And if your coalition truly believed we were hostile, you wouldn't have invited us aboard your station." The subtle rebuke hung in the air for a moment before Trelvauge intervened. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion in the council chamber. Your arrival has generated considerable interest." "Of course," Reyes replied. "Lead the way." As they proceeded through the station's main concourse, coalition citizens of various species stopped to stare at the human delegation. Some recorded images with personal devices, while others whispered among themselves. The humans appeared remarkably similar to several humanoid coalition species, yet distinctly different in ways that proved difficult to articulate. Something in their gait, perhaps, or the alertness in their eyes. Commander Vexloren, walking alongside Captain Reyes, broke the uncomfortable silence. "Your ship's capabilities exceed our most advanced theoretical models. How did you achieve such speed without tearing your vessel apart?" Lieutenant Commander Park, the human science officer, responded with unexpected openness. "Gravitational field manipulation coupled with space-time compression. Your scientists have been moving in the right direction, but you're still trying to push against space rather than folding it." Council scientist Medzik, walking just behind them, made a sound like rustling leaves, her species equivalent of astonishment. "You speak of concepts our greatest minds have barely begun to theorize." "Necessity drives innovation," Reyes said simply. "When your survival depends on solving a problem, you find solutions quickly." The Grand Council chamber, with its soaring crystalline dome and hovering delegates' platforms, normally inspired awe in first-time visitors. The humans, however, took in the spectacle with appreciative but measured glances before focusing on the assembled council members. High Councilor Mevran, his gelatinous form pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that indicated formal address, spoke first. "Captain Reyes of Earth, the Coalition welcomes peaceful contact with new species. However, the nature of your arrival raises concerns about your intentions." Reyes stepped to the center of the speaking circle. Instead of offering the expected diplomatic platitudes, she activated a small device on her wrist. "With respect, Counselor, we don't have time for extended pleasantries." A holographic display materialized above the chamber floor, showing what appeared to be a three-dimensional star map. Red indicators pulsed across several sectors, moving in patterns that caused immediate murmurs among the council members. "This is what you call the Void Swarm," Rai stated, her voice cutting through the rising whispers. A multi-dimensional predatory collective that has been systematically consuming worlds on the outer rim of your territory for the past 87 years. Shock rippled through the chamber. The Void Swarm's existence was classified at the highest levels, a secret known only to senior military commanders and top council officials. How did you? Began Security Minister Krevnar before Rai is interrupted by expanding the hologram. 3 months ago, we detected swarm scout ships near our home system. She continued, highlighting a sector far from known coalition space. We destroyed them, but not before extracting their navigational data. The display shifted again, showing a massive convergence of red indicators moving purposefully toward a single point. They're gathering, counselors, and their target appears to be Earth. High Counselor Mevran's color drained to a pale blue. This information is highly classified. How did a species we've never encountered access Coalition security files? Rhea's expression hardened as she projected a new image. Classified Coalition battle logs showing the deliberate abandonment of outer colonies to slow the swarm's advance. We didn't need your files, she said quietly. We intercepted your transmissions. We watched you sacrifice millions to save billions. Her eyes swept the chamber. We came because what's hunting you has found us. And unlike you, we don't abandon our neighbors. Preposterous accusations, sputtered Council Elder Zivtoth, his crystalline appendages vibrating with indignation. You arrive uninvited in our territory and dare to lecture us on morality. The council chamber had erupted into chaos following Captain Reyes' revelation. Coalition representatives shouted over one another in a cacophony of languages while security drones moved into defensive positions around the human delegation. Security Minister Krevnar pushed through the commotion toward Reyes, towering over her with his armored exoskeleton fully extended. You will surrender your vessel for inspection and remain in custody until we determine how you acquired classified information. Lieutenant Rodriguez, the Thunderchild's security chief, moved almost imperceptibly closer to his captain, hand hovering near what the Coalition species now recognized as a weapon holster. The tension in the room crystallized into something dangerous. Captain Reyes remained unnervingly calm. Minister Krevnar, threatening the representative of a sovereign species constitutes a violation of your own Coalition Charter, Section 17, Paragraph 3. She smiled thinly. Yes, we've studied your laws as well as your tactics. Before Krevnar could respond, Commander Zex Teller stepped between them. The veteran's scared carapace and missing sensory stalks testified to decades of combat experience. The human speaks truth about the swarm, he said, his translator struggling to convey the graveled texture of his native speech. I fought them on 17 worlds. Each time, we arrived too late to save the populations. Commander, you overstep. Krevnar began. I've buried too many soldiers to stand silently while politicians debate, Zex Teller interrupted. If these humans have indeed engaged the swarm and survived, we should listen, not threaten. High Counselor Mevran's bioluminescent patterns shifted to signal for order. Captain Reyes, regardless of how you obtain this information, your claims require verification. What proof can you offer that your species possesses the capability to resist the swarm when our combined coalition forces have barely contained them? Reyes exchanged glances with her science officer before addressing the council. I propose a demonstration, something that will leave no doubt about humanity's technological capabilities. What sort of demonstration? Asked Ambassador Trelvosh, 12 fingers interlaced in a gesture of cautious interest. The abandoned mining sector in the Helios asteroid field, Reyes suggested. It's uninhabited, correct? Lost to a swarm incursion 3 cycles ago. Council scientist, Medzik's compound eyes widened. How could you possibly know about? Your observation deck provides an excellent view of that sector, Reyes continued, ignoring the interruption. I invite the council representatives to witness what a single human warship can do. 30 minutes later, the observation deck teemed with coalition officials and military personnel. The transparent dome offered an unobstructed view of space, with the distant asteroid field visible as a glittering band against the blackness. The Thunderchild had repositioned itself 5,000 kilometers from the station, its sleek profile oriented toward the field. "What exactly are we supposed to be seeing?" Krevnar demanded, mandibles clicking with impatience. Lieutenant Commander Park handed specialized viewing filters to the assembled dignitaries. "These will protect your visual organs from the electromagnetic discharge," he explained. "I suggest using them now." The Thunderchild remained motionless for several seconds before a series of panels along its hull reconfigured, revealing what appeared to be focusing arrays. There was no visible beam, no dramatic discharge, just a subtle ripple in the fabric of space between the warship and the distant asteroid field. Then silence gave way to astonished gasps. The asteroids, massive chunks of rock and metal spanning kilometers, didn't shatter or explode as expected. Instead, they began to glow from within, their structures remaining intact as they heated to temperatures that transformed their surfaces into molten shells. Within moments, the entire field pulsed with controlled energy, forming an intricate web of superheated matter. "That's impossible," whispered Mevzik, her scientific training overwhelmed by what she was witnessing. The energy required to maintain molecular cohesion while inducing plasma state across such distances. "We call it the Helios grid," explained Captain Reyes, watching the display with practiced calm. "The asteroids remain structurally intact while their surfaces convert to energized plasma. Any swarm vessel attempting to pass through that sector would be immediately enveloped and disintegrated at the molecular level." The silence that followed felt weighted with revelation. Coalition military officers exchanged meaningful glances, while council members struggled to maintain their composure. "That was our point defense system," Reyes added quietly. "Would you like to see our actual weapons?" Zextalar, his scared face illuminated by the distant glow of transformed asteroids, turned to Security Minister Krevnar. "I believe the humans have made their point." For the first time in generations, the gathered coalition representatives experienced a sensation many had forgotten: hope, tempered with the unsettling realization that they were no longer the most advanced power in this sector of the galaxy. Commander Zex Teller stood rigidly in the Thunderchild's decontamination chamber, enduring the unfamiliar tingling sensation as human scanning technology assessed him for pathogens. After 3 decades of military service, he had never expected to find himself aboard an alien vessel, especially as a liaison officer, a diplomatic role thrust upon him after his unexpected defense of the humans in the council chamber. The chamber doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing Lieutenant Rodriguez, the human security chief whose hand had moved so naturally toward his weapon during the confrontation with Krevnar. "Welcome aboard the Thunderchild, Commander," Rodriguez said, offering a gesture that approximated the coalition military salute. "Captain Rice apologizes for not greeting you personally. She's coordinating with your fleet commanders on preliminary defense protocols." Zextaler's translator converted his clicking response. "I require no ceremonial welcomes. Show me your battle systems, not your courtesies." Rodriguez's expression shifted into what Zextaler would later learn was a smile, though at that moment, the baring of teeth struck him as oddly primal. "Of course, Commander. Right this way." As they traversed the ship's corridors, Zextaler found himself cataloging details with military precision. The vessel's interior was surprisingly austere compared to the ornate design elements favored by coalition craft. Every surface served a function. Every intersection offered multiple evacuation routes. Most striking was the crew themselves. They acknowledged his presence not with the fearful deference alien visitors typically received on coalition vessels, but with brief nods of recognition, as though his presence was expected rather than extraordinary. "Your crew seems unusually calm about hosting an alien officer," Zextaler observed as they entered a lift that would take them to the tactical deck. Rodriguez shrugged, a distinctly human gesture. "We've been preparing for first contact since before we left our solar system." Finding other intelligent life wasn't a surprise. It was an inevitability we've trained for. The lift doors opened to reveal the Thunderchild's Combat Information Center, a circular chamber bathed in soft blue light where 24 crew members worked at various stations. What immediately struck Zex Taller wasn't the advanced technology, impressive though it was, but the atmosphere among the personnel. A group of officers near a holographic display were laughing. "Is something amusing about your defensive preparations?" he asked, mandibles clicking with mild disapproval. "Oh, that's Lieutenant Chen's team," Rodriguez explained. "They're comparing the swarm's attack patterns to ancient Earth predators. It's a targeting analysis technique we found effective, finding parallels between new threats and those our ancestors faced. You laugh before battle." Zex Talar couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. Before Rodriguez could respond, a voice called out from across the chamber. "We laugh especially before battle, Commander." Captain Rice approached, extending her hand in what Zex Talar recognized as their species' greeting ritual. "It's one of our peculiarities. Humor helps us process fear, maintain unit cohesion, and remain adaptable under pressure." As they toured the tactical systems, Zex Talar observed the humans with growing curiosity. They shifted effortlessly between disciplined professionalism and casual camaraderie. In one section, officers analyzed swarm movement patterns with mathematical precision. In another, crew members shared images of their homeworld and family units while calibrating weapon systems. "This is our main tactical display," Rise explained, gesturing toward a three-dimensional representation of nearby space. "We've integrated coalition star charts with our own observations." Zex Talar studied the display, noting the precision with which human systems had mapped swarm incursions. "You've identified patterns our analysts missed," he admitted reluctantly. "Different perspective," Rice said. "Your coalition evolved from predominantly prey species that developed intelligence as a survival adaptation. Humanity evolved as apex predators. We understand hunting behavior instinctively." Before Zex Talar could process this unsettling observation, alarms blared throughout the ship. A young human officer's voice cut through the sudden activity. "Captain, emergency transmission from Coalition Outpost Vega 7. They're under swarm attack." Reyes turned to Zex Talar, all traces of the diplomatic captain replaced by something more primal. "Looks like you'll get to see our battle systems in action sooner than expected, Commander." What followed was unlike any combat deployment Zex Talar had witnessed in his long career. The human crew didn't scramble in rehearsed patterns like coalition forces. Instead, they moved with a fluid adaptability, calling out information while the ship's engines surged to life. Most striking was how they maintained communication, not just relaying data, but encouraging one another, even making remarks that his translator identified as humor despite the escalating crisis. As the Thunderchild accelerated toward the endangered outpost, Zex Talar realized he was witnessing something his species had evolved away from generations ago. Not just warriors fighting with advanced technology, but a tribe defending its extended territory with the primal ferocity of creatures who had clawed their way to the stars rather than being lifted by peaceful evolution. And against the Void Swarm, he suspected that humanity's controlled savagery might be precisely what the galaxy needed. The aftermath of the Vega 7 engagement left Coalition officials stunned. Not only had the Thunderchild arrived before their own response vessels, but the human warship had engaged 3 swarm destroyers simultaneously without sustaining critical damage. Most astonishing was their rescue operation, extracting 142 survivors from the research outpost while still under active fire. In the Thunderchild's medical bay, Engineer Daniels calibrated equipment to accommodate the varied physiologies of the injured Coalition scientists. His dark fingers moved with practiced precision across control panels as he spoke softly to a young Aetheri researcher whose translucent limbs bore the distinctive burns of swarm weapons. "Your cellular structure responds well to our regenerative compounds," he explained, monitoring the healing progress on his tablet. "Another treatment cycle should restore full mobility to your affected appendages. Commander Zex Tauler watched from the doorway, noting how the human medical team adapted their techniques for species they'd never encountered before today. They worked with the calm efficiency he'd observed during battle, but now accompanied by something his translator had difficulty parsing, a gentle reassurance that transcended language barriers. "Your species continues to surprise me," Zex Tauler admitted as Daniels approached. "In combat, you fight with controlled ferocity. Here, you demonstrate remarkable empathy for aliens you've just met." Daniels smiled tiredly. "Not so different, really. Both require understanding the other, whether it's an enemy's weakness or a patient's needs." He gestured toward his workstation. "I've been analyzing the swarm attack patterns from the engagement. Something about their coordination seemed familiar." Zex Tauler followed the engineer to a display showing movement patterns of the swarm vessels. What had initially appeared as random assault vectors now revealed subtle command structures when played through the human's analytical software. "They weren't simply attacking," Daniels explained, highlighting interconnected flight patterns. "They were transmitting data, massive amounts of it, not just between themselves, but toward coalition frequencies." The commander's sensory stalks stiffened. "That's impossible. Our communication protocols are compromised," Daniels finished, lowering his voice, "and have been for some time, based on these patterns. Look at the transmission bursts directed toward this specific frequency band." The display shifted to highlight a narrow communication channel, one Zex Tauler immediately recognized as the Secure Council frequency. "This frequency is reserved for High Counselor Mevran's direct communications," he whispered, the implications settling like cold weight in his thoracic cavity. "What exactly are you suggesting, Engineer Daniels?" "I'm not suggesting anything yet," Daniels replied carefully. "But I think we both need to look closer at these communication logs." He hesitated before adding, "and perhaps not announce our investigation too widely." Their clandestine analysis continued through 3 ship cycles, with Daniels developing increasingly sophisticated decryption algorithms, while Zex Tauler provided access codes to Coalition archives. The humans' relentless focus impressed the veteran commander. Daniels worked without breaks, consuming only stimulant beverages the humans called coffee, while pursuing digital patterns most Coalition analysts would have dismissed as background noise. The breakthrough came during the 3rd cycle, as Captain Rice was engaged in strategic planning with Coalition admirals aboard Proxima Station. "There," Daniels said, his voice barely audible as encryption layers peeled away on his display. "It's not just random data transmission. It's coordinates." Zex Tauler leaned closer, his compound eyes processing the decrypted information. The data stream contained precise navigational markers for Coalition outposts, refugee concentrations, and resource centers, all transmitted on Mevran's secure channel directly after swarm contact events. "He's been feeding them targets," Zex Tauler breathed, mandibles twitching with suppressed rage. "Negotiating safe passage for Central Coalition worlds by sacrificing our frontier settlements." Daniels nodded grimly. "And look at the latest transmission, timestamped just after our demonstration in the asteroid field." The final data package required no decryption. It contained a single set of coordinates that Zex Tauler didn't recognize, along with detailed analyses of the Thunderchild's defensive capabilities. "What system is that?" Daniels asked, noting the commander's reaction. "It's not a Coalition system," Zex Tauler replied, his voice hollow. "Based on the stellar cartography from your ship's database, those are the coordinates for your homeworld, Earth." The implications hung between them like a physical presence. Not only had Coalition leadership betrayed their own people, but they had now marked humanity for sacrifice, offering Earth's location to the swarm as their next target. At that moment, Lieutenant Commander Park burst into the engineering bay, her usual composed demeanor replaced by urgent concern. "Daniels, Commander, the captain needs you both immediately. Long-range sensors have detected a massive swarm fleet assembling at the Heliopoint Nexus." Zex Tauler's military training couldn't fully suppress the dread in his voice. "What vector?" "Direct course for Sol system. Park confirmed, her dark eyes meeting Daniel's. "They're heading for Earth." "You have evidence to support these accusations?" Captain Rice asked, her voice measured despite the gravity of Daniel's revelation. The Thunderchild's senior officers had gathered in the secure briefing room along with Commander Zex Talar, the holographic displays showing the damning communication logs, verified and cross-referenced against Coalition archives. Daniels confirmed, highlighting key transmission timestamps. High Counselor Mevran has been coordinating with the Swarm for at least 7 standard years, deliberately sacrificing outer settlements while protecting Central Coalition interests. Lieutenant Rodriguez's hand clenched around his tactical pad. "And now they've given the Swarm our coordinates. Earth is directly in their path." Zex Teller's mandibles clicked rhythmically, a sign of deep distress in his species. "On behalf of the Coalition forces loyal to our founding principles, I offer my deepest apology. This betrayal dishonors generations of sacrifice." "This isn't about apologies," Commander Rice replied, studying the strategic display. "It's about what we do next. Earth's defense grid is formidable, but insufficient against a fleet of this magnitude." Lieutenant Commander Park's fingers danced across her console, running projections. "Even at maximum speed, we wouldn't reach Earth before the Swarm. Our best option is to prevent them from departing the Nexus. We need Coalition support for that," Rice said, looking directly at Zex Talar. "Can you rally forces loyal to you rather than the Council?" The commander hesitated, compound eyes shifting between the humans. Revealing this evidence would fracture the Coalition at the moment we need unity most, yet concealing it perpetuates the betrayal. After a long moment, he straightened to his full height. "I stand with you, Captain Rice. We must present this evidence to the full Council immediately." 3 hours later, the Emergency Council session convened with representatives from all 17 Coalition species. Captain Rice stood at the center of the chamber, her uniform immaculate, as she methodically presented the evidence, while Daniels operated the holographic displays. "In conclusion," she stated, her voice carrying throughout the silent chamber, "High Counselor Mevran and his associates have deliberately sacrificed billions of lives to protect their personal interests, and have now marked Earth for destruction." Chaos erupted as accusation and denial surged through the chamber. Security Minister Krevnar's voice cut through the din. "These preposterous allegations from an alien species clearly intent on sowing discord within our ranks. Guards, detain the human delegation and seize their vessel." Coalition security forces moved with practiced efficiency, surrounding the human officers while weapon emplacements emerged from hidden compartments around the chamber. Ambassador Trelvosh raised his 12-fingered hands. "Captain Rice, please surrender peacefully. I assure you this matter will be investigated thoroughly." Rodriguez tensed, hand moving toward his sidearm, but Rice's slight headshake stopped him. Her eyes remained fixed on Mevran, whose gelatinous form had shifted to a deep purple, a sign of rage in his species. "You've made your choice," then Rice said quietly, touching a concealed communicator on her wrist. "Thunderchild Actual. Protocol Shadowfall." What happened next would be debated in Coalition historical records for generations. The chamber's lights flickered momentarily as localized energy fields disabled the Coalition weapons while leaving the humans' equipment operational. Rodriguez moved with blinding speed, drawing his sidearm and precisely disabling 3 security drones before they could target Reyes. Lieutenant Commander Park activated a personal shield generator that expanded to cover the human delegation as Daniels interfaced with the chamber's communication systems. Throughout Proxima Station, the evidence against Mevran began broadcasting on all frequencies, reaching not just military channels but civilian networks as well. "We didn't come here seeking conflict," Rice announced, her voice steady as she backed toward the chamber exit with her team in practiced formation. "But we will not surrender to those who've betrayed their own people and marked our world for destruction." Security Minister Krevnar charged forward, metallic exoskeleton extending combat blades. "You'll never leave this station alive." The blow that should have impaled Captain Reyes never landed. Commander Zex Stellar intercepted the attack, his natural armor cracking under the impact, but holding just long enough for Rodriguez to neutralize Krevnar with a precisely targeted stun blast. "Captain," Zex Stellar gasped, green fluid seeping from his damaged carapace. "My family quarters. Section 47B. The Council will detain them as leverage." Rise nodded sharply. "Thunderchild, priority transmission. Extraction team to Section 47B civilian retrieval. Maximum urgency." Throughout Proxima Station, the situation deteriorated rapidly as the evidence spread. Coalition military units faced an impossible choice between loyalty to command structure and the horrifying truth of leadership betrayal. Civil conflict erupted across multiple decks as Mevran's security forces attempted to contain the spreading information. As the human delegation fought their way toward the docking bay, they encountered not just resistance but unexpected allies, coalition officers and civilians who had seen the evidence and chosen to stand against corruption. And aboard the Thunderchild, Lieutenant Commander Jackson led a rescue team into the heart of Proxima Station, determined to extract innocent civilians caught in the crossfire of a conflict that would forever change the balance of power in the galaxy. Lieutenant Commander Jackson moved through Proxima Station's residential section with practiced efficiency, leading a 6-person extraction team through corridors now filled with panicked civilians. The station's emergency lighting cast everything in pulsing red shadows as announcement systems blared contradictory orders, some demanding compliance with security forces, others warning of leadership betrayal. Section 47B ahead. Communications Specialist Chen reported, consulting her tactical display. Life signs indicate multiple Zithran biosignatures consistent with Commander Zex Stellar's family unit. Jackson signaled the team to halt as they reached an intersection where Coalition security drones patrolled outside a sealed habitat door. "Non-lethal measures only," he reminded the team. "These guards are following orders, not necessarily complicit." With synchronized precision, the human team deployed localized EMP devices that disabled the security drones without triggering station-wide alerts. Tech specialist Okafor bypassed the door controls using authentication codes provided by Zex Stellar. Inside, they found 3 Zithran civilians, the commander's mate, and 2 juvenile offspring, huddled in the central chamber. The adults' protective membranes had extended fully around the young, natural defense mechanisms activated by the perception of imminent threat. "We're here under Commander Zex Stellar's authority," Jackson explained, his translator conveying reassurance tones. "Captain Rice sent us to ensure your safety." The adult Zithran's membranes remained extended. "How can we trust humans we've never encountered before?" Jackson removed his tactical helmet, revealing his face, a gesture of vulnerability rarely seen in Coalition military protocols. "Your mate fights alongside us against corruption that threatens both our worlds. We don't abandon allies or their families." Across the station, Captain Rice and her team fought their way toward Docking Bay 7, where the Thunderchild had established a secure evacuation corridor. Coalition security forces, confused by contradictory orders and the spreading evidence of leadership betrayal, offered inconsistent resistance. "Captain," Rodriguez called out, securing an intersection, "civilian broadcast channels are overwhelmed with the evidence we released. Public opinion is turning against the Council leadership." Rice nodded grimly as she applied emergency medical treatment to Zex Stellar's wounded thorax. "Good. The more transparency, the better our chances of preventing all-out war." As they approached the docking bay, Rice's communicator activated. "Captain, this is Jackson. Extraction successful. We have the commander's family and 17 additional civilians requesting asylum. Proceeding to secondary extraction point." "Acknowledged. Wheel." Rice began before station-wide alarms interrupted her response. "Attention all personnel," announced a voice Rice recognized as High Counselor Mevran's. "The humans have deployed biological weapons throughout Proxima Station. All sectors are under quarantine. Security forces are authorized to use lethal measures to prevent their escape." Rodriguez cursed under his breath. "Biological weapons? a convenient lie to justify killing us all. More than that, Zextuller rasped, struggling to maintain consciousness despite his injuries. It provides cover for eliminating witnesses while blaming humans for the casualties. The final approach to the docking bay revealed Mevran's strategy. Coalition destroyers had moved to blockade position around the Thunderchild, while inside the station, environmental controls began cycling down in civilian sectors. Not a biological attack, but life support being systematically disabled by the Council's own security protocols. Thunderchild actual to away team, came the voice of Lieutenant Hernandez, the officer commanding the warship in Reyes's absence. We're detecting life support failures across multiple civilian sectors. Coalition vessels are blocking our position and charging weapons. Reyes exchanged glances with her officers, the impossible choice clear in their expressions. They could force their way back to the Thunderchild and potentially escape, but thousands of civilians would die from life support failure, deaths that would be blamed on humanity. Thunderchild, maintain position. Reyes ordered. Prepare to receive evacuees. All tactical systems on defensive posture only. Captain, Hernandez questioned, understanding the implications of her command. You heard me, Lieutenant, Reyes confirmed. We didn't come all this way to abandon people in need. Rodriguez, coordinate with loyal coalition forces to establish evacuation routes. Daniels, I need control of the station's environmental systems. We're not leaving anyone behind to die in darkness. What followed became known in later coalition accounts as the Salvation Run. As Council forces attempted to capture or kill the human delegation, Captain Reyes redirected her mission entirely toward evacuating civilian sectors where life support had been compromised. The Thunderchild, despite being targeted by coalition destroyers, deployed its shuttlecraft and escape pods to ferry civilians to safety. Commander Jackson's team, having secured Zextuller's family, established a secondary evacuation point in the medical sector where they found additional allies, coalition medical personnel who refused orders to abandon patients. The turning point came when Lieutenant Commander Jackson, coordinating the final civilian extraction from a failing life support sector, found his team's retreat cut off by advancing security forces. Without hesitation, he sealed his team and the evacuees in the last functional shuttle, while remaining behind to manually override the launch protocols that Council forces had locked down. Jackson, get out of there, Reyes ordered over the deteriorating communication channel. No time, Captain, he replied calmly. Launch controls are physically disabled. Manual override is the only option. As coalition forces breached the outer doors, Jackson completed the override sequence. The shuttle launched successfully, carrying 27 civilians to safety aboard the Thunderchild. Jackson turned to face the advancing forces, a single human standing against overwhelming odds. When asked to surrender, survivors reported his response became a rallying cry for the resistance that followed. Some things are worth dying for. Some people are worth saving. 3 weeks after the Proxima Station incident, the reformed coalition gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Auxiliary Diplomatic Station Novus Prima. The massive chamber, originally designed to accommodate formal ceremonies, now served as both meeting space and recovery center for refugees from the conflict that had fractured the 17-species confederacy. Captain Helena Reyes entered the hall slowly, still recovering from injuries sustained during the evacuation. Her right arm remained in a regenerative sleeve, and medical nanites visibly circulated beneath the skin of her temple, where Krevenar's final desperate attack had nearly claimed her life. Despite her injuries, she walked unaided, uniform impeccable as she approached the central speaking platform. Representatives from 14 coalition species rose in unified acknowledgement, a gesture of respect traditionally reserved for founding world leaders. The other 3 species sections remained conspicuously empty, their governments having sided with Mevran's faction in the continuing conflict. Captain Reyes greeted Interim Council Coordinator Trelvosh, his 12 fingers arranged in the pattern signifying highest honor. We welcome you and offer our profound gratitude. Without humanity's intervention, The corruption within our leadership would have continued, and countless more worlds would have been sacrificed. Reyes inclined her head slightly. My crew's actions reflect humanity's core principles, not any exceptional heroism. We did what any sentient being should do when witnessing injustice. We stood against it. The assembly hall's primary display activated, showing real-time footage from the orbital shipyards, where Coalition engineers worked alongside human technicians. The Thunderchild, having sustained critical damage during the final confrontation with Mevran's forces, was undergoing extensive repairs. More striking were the Coalition vessels docked alongside it, being retrofitted with adapted human defensive systems. Commander Zex Talar, newly appointed as defense coordinator, stepped forward. His shattered carapace had been partially replaced with synthetic materials, giving him a hybrid appearance that somehow seemed appropriate for his position bridging two civilizations. The Void Swarm continues its advance, he reported, activating tactical displays. Mevran's faction has retreated to the inner sanctum worlds, taking significant military assets with them. However, our combined intelligence indicates the Swarm no longer views them as valuable negotiating partners now that their duplicity has been exposed. And Earth? Reyes asked, the concern evident in her voice despite her composed expression. The Thunderchild's transmission buoys have maintained connection with your homeworld, Zex Teller confirmed. Your defense authorities received our warnings and have implemented the shield technology specifications we provided. It won't stop the Swarm completely, but it will slow their advance until reinforcements arrive. Science Minister Medzik, her compound eyes reflecting the tactical displays, addressed the assembly. The integration of human theoretical approaches with our established technologies has yielded unprecedented breakthroughs. What my predecessors dismissed as primitive thinking, I recognize now as vital cognitive diversity. The displays shifted to show testing results from the combined weapons research. Coalition precision targeting systems, merged with human adaptive algorithms, had produced defense systems exponentially more effective against swarm biomechanical structures. We have 17 days before the main swarm fleet reaches the defensive perimeter, Rodriguez reported, now serving as Joint Tactical Coordinator. The combined task force will deploy in 3 stages, utilizing both coalition jump networks and human phase shift technology. As the strategic briefing continued, Captain Reyes observed the seamless cooperation between species that weeks ago had regarded each other with suspicion or outright hostility. Coalition staff officers consulted human historical databases, studying ancient Earth conflicts for tactical insights, while human engineers adapted their technologies to work with coalition energy matrices. When the briefing concluded, the Reformed Council unanimously approved a previously unthinkable proposal, offering Earth formal recognition as a founding world in the new interstellar alliance, with full technological exchange and mutual defense commitments. Trelvosh presented the formal documentation to Captain Reyes. What does humanity wish in return for saving our civilization from itself? The assembly hall fell silent as all attention focused on Reyes. Her response would define relations between their civilizations for generations to come. We don't need special status or territory, she said, her voice carrying easily throughout the chamber. We need partners who understand that strength isn't measured by what you can take, but by what you're willing to protect. Earth has always faced its darkest hours alone. We simply ask that we never have to do so again. The silence that followed broke with a sound never before heard in coalition proceedings. Applause, a human custom of approval that spread through the assembly until representatives from all 14 species participated in their own biological manner, from the rhythmic membrane pulsing of the etheri to the harmonic resonance of the crystalline Zivtoth. 6 months later, when the first joint human coalition fleet launched from Earth's orbital shipyards to counter the swarm's advance, each vessel bore a new insignia created by a human artist working with coalition designers. Diverse appendages, human hands, Zithran claws, etheri tendrils, joined together against a field of stars. Below the image, inscribed in both human and coalition languages, were the words Lieutenant Commander Jackson had spoken in his final moments. Some things are worth dying for. Some people are worth saving. The war against the Void Swarm would continue for years, but never again would Earth or the Coalition worlds face the darkness alone. The arrival of a single human warship had ignited conflict, exposed corruption, and ultimately forged an alliance that would reshape the galaxy.